The protagonist's destiny changed in an instant when one fine day, she met a girl who spoke unexpected words to her. Suddenly, a stranger approached and said that the main character was a character created simply by someone's imagination. And this whole world they live in is just a novel. This is a novel created solely by the author's imagination. And after 6 years, the protagonist will die because she is Della Rimir. Her eyes look surprised by what she heard. The main character has always been sure that a person's worth is determined by the time they have lived. This morning, while Della was serving tea, Duke Han Rimir spoke to his son, telling him that among the 4 great wars, the second one was the right one. And then, Della's thoughts turned to what it would be like to be born in a man's body. And perhaps her destiny would have been different if she had been born a man. Young Duke Jerdal Rimir asked the young man if he was referring to the war in the region. And to Euclin, Della Rimir was the daughter of a duke, and this morning her thoughts were very different from usual. Once in her life, an incident had already happened that turned her mind upside down. It happened after meeting a stranger who told the girl that she would definitely become the one to change this world. The girl never indulged in illusions, because these words were never meant to come true. Her relationship with her brother was quite difficult, and he very often spoke to Della with disgust. She confidently stated that her brother had just mixed up the wars, and she was sure he couldn't know it. Della thought that if she were a man, she wouldn't have learned to make tea, as befits an aristocrat, and she wouldn't make unnecessary moves just to please her father. And her brother. That day, she was in her office to complete a very important task. She asked the maid Emma to send a letter at once to the address Della would provide. When she was leaving, the maid turned the letter over and saw on the back that it was entrusted to Duke Yash. Della thought about that day when she was still a baby and met that stranger. His words said that she would definitely become the one to change this world. And he was eagerly awaiting this important hour. Then the young man handed her a paper and told her that if she needed help, she could always send a letter to this address. And 13 years have passed since she received the patronage of Count Yasha. Della never saw him again after that, but thanks to the letters, she didn't feel the distance. Someone knocked on the door of Della's office. For a second, she thought it was the maid and immediately asked if she had returned yet. But the maid's voice interrupted her and said that a certain guest had arrived at the lady's house. A pretty pink-haired girl entered her office and apologized for the late introduction. And after introducing herself, she stated her name and origin, Risha of the Lushli clan. Extending her hand to the mistress, she said she was very pleased to meet you. Realizing this, Della was stunned to learn why this guest had come to see her. After the emperor's power weakened, the imperial and anti-imperial factions split, and 3 ducal families came to power. Like Rimir, Lushli, and Ferdo, since the Rimir and Lushli families were from different factions, they did not want to see each other. Therefore, Della did not understand why this girl decided to come here. The stranger, taking Della's hands, said she was here because she wanted to see the lady. Immediately, Richa asked the lady if she knew the real reason for her appearance. Della replied that if she had known, Richa obviously wouldn't have asked her anything. It was clear in the lady's eyes that this girl seemed extremely rude to her. And all the rumors circulating about her could be true. One day, Richie developed a severe fever of unknown origin, and the illness did not subside even after the family contacted all the famous doctors on the continent. And when everyone accepted her imminent death, Risha was miraculously cured and recovered. But the joy was short-lived, because the girl completely forgot all the basics of etiquette. And she couldn't remember who she was, so from then on she behaved very strangely. Recently, rumors spread that the daughter of the Lushli family had completely lost her mind. So all her words sounded extremely strange. She told the girl that she really wanted to see Della because she genuinely liked her. And that's why she came here. Della was a little surprised that Richa spoke exactly as they say there are no unfounded rumors. And Della thought she probably should have listened to them. Richa began to talk about liking Della as a character. She is smart, greedy, independent, not so good. Which surprised Della, even more as to why she called her a character. Richa said that it might be difficult for the girl to understand her, and probably doesn't even understand what she is talking about. So I asked, what about the fact that she was a devoted reader of the novel in which Della appears? Della's eyes filled with even greater bewilderment. She did not understand at all what this strange girl meant. And naturally, she was surprised by everything she said. Richa suggested explaining it even more simply, so that Della could finally understand what was going on. Richa stated that the main character is a character created by someone's imagination. And that day, she told her that her whole world was invented by some author's imagination. And the world itself, including, was created by the imagination of a certain author. Richa called herself a reader, and said it would be clearer that she was a different person if she said she was a different person inhabiting the body of a character in the novel. She had a feeling that, as she kept talking, Richa was getting angrier and angrier. Della did not understand whether the world she lived in was the product of someone's imagination. She immediately told her that she was going too far. Richa apologized if her words sounded like a joke. But she is not so frivolous as to joke on the first meeting. But this does not matter at all, since she is here for another matter. Della tried to understand her the whole time, but in the end decided that she could not understand at all what the stranger meant. And she told Richa that if she left her house quietly, she would not ask how she got here. The girl stated that she just wanted to give the main character a chance, and that it was natural to want everything to go well for her favorite character. So she informed her about her impending death. Richa confidently stated that this will happen in 6 years. And all this is because Della Rimir is the villain of this novel. So, one beautiful day, the protagonist unexpectedly learned that her death would come in a few years. Della asked again, "Surely the lady thinks I will believe all the nonsense you just said." Richa started to laugh mischievously and continued to say that if Della didn't believe her, she would die in 6 years. Della said that what happened is very possible, and it is common for all people to die. And she asked her subjects to escort Risha out of her office. Grabbing Della's hands, Risha suddenly announced that she was not finished yet. And she also announced that Marquis Tesla's son was not suitable for her. Finally, she said that Della should take care of herself, and, for formality, congratulated her on her upcoming wedding. Della just silently dismissed this lady with her perplexed gaze. The next day, the whole family gathered at the table. The Duke said that Marquis Tesla's eldest son was a good person. Della was very surprised to hear the Duke talking about this man, because recently the crazy Richa had talked about him. She decided to consult with her father if he was really going to marry her off. Della's brother asked if the Marquis Tesla family did not have a close relationship with them, and that he was an excellent candidate for a future spouse. Her thoughts were only that everything Risha said seemed to start resembling reality. Or predictions. Did she remember Rishi's words, who had recently mentioned that Marquis Tesla's son was not suitable for her? She couldn't understand how the lady knew this, but surely this marriage had been agreed upon long before. The Duke began to apologize for having surprised Adela with his statements. The Duke said that only today they began to discuss this topic, so he decided to ask for her opinion. Which of course surprised Della, because in her mind she had already convinced herself that Richa simply knew about these discussions in advance. If today means there were no agreements, but no, there must be another reason. Della said that the news about the marriage did not surprise her. These words were a relief to the Duke, since her opinion was very important to them. But she immediately continued by saying that, however, she was not sure that the Tesla family was suitable for them. After all, her family is one of the emperor's confidants and one of the great ducal families of the empire. Her family still has room to grow, and there is no need for them to sink like this. The Duke did not think that she was thinking about this, and also stated that her father had been a close collaborator of His Majesty for a long time. And she is not that insightful, so she only sees the way up in the Duke's eyes. And Della's brother. It was obvious that whatever Della said would surprise them. She continued by saying that if the man suits her, she will happily accept the proposal. But if not, "It is better to refrain from marriage." The Duke asked what the girl meant, and she replied that her father must surely understand the seriousness of her intentions. The Duke agreed to look for someone else. The father asked his son, furious with anger, if he understood what was happening, to which he replied with a malicious yes. Della thanked the family for dinner and said it was getting late and she should probably leave. All that night she was turning over in her head how Risha found out about the marriage that no one knew about. How did she guess the timing of the wedding? At that moment, a maid approached her and told her that the daughter of Duke Hydrea had invited her to a tea party. However, Lady Lucially said she also intended to attend this gathering. Della was definitely not happy with this news. Judging by her facial expression, Della asked the maid to tell her that she would definitely come. Because at this gathering, she might find out everything by asking her personally. Her consent for the meeting quickly reached the daughter of the Hydra family. The lady was excited that two families that could be compared to rivals simultaneously accepted her invitation. And thanks to them, it was necessary to reorganize the tea party. Lady Rimir was the first to arrive at the tea party and told Jessie that she had done a great job in preparation. She smiled and said Lady Hydra and paid close attention to the meeting and was very polite to everyone. Jessie said she was happy to see Della and invited her to come closer. Della noticed that she was sitting too far from Lady Lucially and paid attention to the family with whom they had mutual enmity. As usual, the ladies began to discuss engagements, families among themselves, and loves, and Della was far removed from this gossip. Selina, a girl from a wealthy family, said that she met her future husband thanks to agreements between their families. And now she is getting to know him little by little. Della thought for a moment, but suddenly heard a familiar voice behind her. Right behind her was Lady Richa, who had also arrived for the formal tea party. It was as if their eyes met in another universe. But Jessie immediately began to escort Richa in another direction. Risha smiled cheerfully and took out a basket, saying she had a gift for everyone, and that she hoped everyone would like it. All the assembled ladies were completely delighted with Rishi's action. It turned out that she already knew many women who had heard that Risha had been unwell recently. They thought she wouldn't come, but Risha said she was much better. Della was very surprised that Richa was very rude to her last time. But now in secular society, she behaved completely differently. And she was very kind. A moment later, Richa had already approached Della, which left her perplexed as to why she approached her so decisively. She suddenly handed her a box with some kind of jewelry and told her that she had a gift for Lady Rimir. Lady Rimir was very surprised and could not believe that it was exactly the same girl who came to her that day. But now she was suspiciously polite and kind. Della replied that the brooch looked nice, but that they were not close enough for her to accept it. Risha turned around and simply accepted this fact, about which she could do nothing. The tea party was already coming to an end, and Lady Rimir was still sitting completely alone, watching how Risha managed to communicate with everyone present. It was already getting dark, and everyone was starting to go home. Della wondered if she would now have to wait for the next meeting to talk to Risha again and resolve everything. Leaving the estate, Della saw someone in front of her. She saw the same Selina who was talking about her new husband at the tea party. The angry young man shouted at her that he was here and was indignant that she was waiting for him in front of the mansion. But she still didn't show up. Selina, frightened, began to apologize to her husband. The girl said that she had informed her husband about the appointment and that he had no reason to be so angry. Della remembered Selina's words that her husband was a good man, but simply assertive, and with great willpower. But no matter how you look at it, he was definitely not a good person. At that moment, Richa approached them and asked if the lady was leaving for home because they thought they would discuss something else. Selina turned to her and was bewildered. Richa began to say that all this seemed strange to her, since Lady Lesquicile didn't even know about her arrival here. The young man said he was very sorry because he was the first to arrange a meeting, and they could talk to Selina at another time. Richa asked if they could reschedule the meeting, because she really wanted to talk to her now. But the boy got angry and shouted at the innocent girl that she was really crazy. Della was completely shocked by everything that was happening before her eyes. Richa asked her if she knew what people who said she was crazy had in common. Richa said threateningly, "No matter what she says, no one can hide their feelings. And they only do what they lose their temper. Therefore, if anyone here can be called crazy, it is clearly only this young man, who is now standing and angry at an innocent lady." Delay approached them and asked what Viscount Demian had come for. The Viscount accidentally called the lady by her first name, who was immediately indignant because she should be addressed as Lady Rimir. And she did not give him permission to call her by her first name. And besides, Lady Lucially is a young duchess, so you must behave appropriately towards her. The young man realized that he had just made a mistake, and in front of everyone shouted at his beloved, for whom two respectable ladies stood up and immediately began to flee like mad. Richa said that Lady Lexicile should also go home, and it seemed that the girl was probably very tired. As Richa watched Selina leave, she wondered why she shouldn't tell her about the world inside the book. And if we talk about acting, that lady was the worst supporting character, and there was no point in telling her. She looked closely at Della and asked, her eyes showing that the girl wanted to tell her something. Della replied that she wanted to know the truth, and the lady said that in that case the conversation would be long. And she suggested they go for a walk together. Richa said she has a very interesting proposal. Della asked what the offer was and how Richa would benefit from it, but Richa did not answer anything, and just smiled mysteriously in response, simply offering to trust her words. Now Della was sitting in her office and recalling the words this strange girl had recently told her. That day, she talked about the future that awaited Della. Risha affirmatively asked if she had been corresponding with Count Yasha for 10 years. No. But Della was perplexed as to how she knew this. She began to say that she had read the novel and immediately asked Della not to believe everything the Count told her, and for some reason, her words sounded very true. Although she said that the day would come when Della would understand everything, she did not see it after their first meeting. In the Empire, Count Yasha was known as a very rich and influential man. However, even with such a reputation, he does not stand out from the crowd, but on the contrary. He is shrouded in various rumors, and the most likely rumor about him is that the Count is an old man over 70 years old. The day the protagonist managed to see him for the first time, she stood behind a tree and watched her brother. Then an unknown young man approached her and asked what such a small girl was doing there. This young man looked very unusual, and a special magical energy emanated from him. Della told him that she wanted to learn fencing, so she had to secretly observe how her father learned. And her brother. The young man was surprised that such a small girl could want to learn fencing, because this type of activity is not typical for girls. Then, the brave Della confidently declared that swords change the world, and knowledge changes people. And she asked if the young man did not feel curious to know what strong power it could be, and how it could change the world and people. That's why they say you have to keep thinking and be careful with prejudices. The young man noticed that this girl was a very unusual child and decided to ask her how old she was. Della bravely replied that she was 10 years old, and the young man, in turn, emphasized that she was very smart for her age. He also said that he eagerly awaited the moment when she could finally change the whole world. Della understood that Lady Lucially knew that the rumors about Count Yasha's age were lies. And the reason for this was the world inside the book. But she didn't say why the girl shouldn't trust this man and probably knows something, or is hiding something. The maid Emma approached the girl, whose face looked very worried. She said in a trembling voice that a young knight had come to Lady Rimir and was waiting for her in the living room. Her brother burst into her office, and the lady was indignant that he had come to her so unexpectedly. The young man asked if the girl was really nervous because she couldn't beat him. To which Della replied that they didn't play anything so that he could defeat her. He reported that he heard that his sister made a mistake and stained the man's honor in front of his fiancée. And besides, the refusal to marry the Tesla family. It also dealt a blow to her reputation. And she alone is to blame for everything. Now her brother has to be in such a difficult situation. Della replied that she was only teaching Viscount Damien a lesson. And besides, the Count's son was the first to disrespect her and threaten Lady Lucially, which is a bad move in politics. And in general, before criticizing her, her brother should have found out all the details first. He furiously asked her why she shouldn't worry about herself. 2 days ago, the father met with Duke Hurdle and became convinced that his son was an ideal candidate for a husband. The father must have talked about her wedding, and that conversation about the wedding proves Jerdal's connection with the Marquis Tesla family. So the most suitable candidate for the Rimmer family is a member of the imperial family. And this must have greatly worried Jerdal. And probably, her brother simply couldn't accept the idea that his sister could become a great empress. Della said that she had already expressed her intentions last time, but the young man said that his sister could not influence the marriage discussions, even if she tried to intervene. Della replied that the young man underestimated himself and that it was not he who proposed negotiating a marriage with the Tesla family. The brother replied that he did not guarantee anything, but that he would try to talk to everyone involved in this. Upon leaving the office, the young man called Emma to accompany him, as his parents had contacted him. And he left his sister alone with her thoughts. Sitting in her chair, Della realized that the conversations about the wedding were still haunting her. The Hydri clan had power and was a good political partner, and it would be difficult to refuse such a candidate. But this was her life, and the girl did not want to look down and get a partner of the same status as her. And the only thing she really wanted was to rise even higher. And in this case, there is no point in trying to do everything alone. And the lady needed to find another way to resolve the situation. She crumpled a letter and began to write another. In a new letter, she expressed her request to Count Yasha, a request to marry her. That's why she urgently asked the maid Emma to send a letter to the Count. Her brother snatched the letter from the maid's hands as she was taking it out of the office. He was not surprised. He was furious that his sister was going to marry the old Count. He himself threw her letter into the fireplace and really wanted his sister not to guess anything. The young man asked the maid to bring the same stationery that Della uses. And he ordered to look for a person who could forge her handwriting. The young man could not understand how he found out about the marriage negotiations, because it was completely secret. But he was sure that he would not let her ruin everything, and hoped that his sister would happily accept his special gift. After lunch, Della sat near the mirror and tried on earrings that would match the color of her new dress. Emma helped her, but her mood reflected great distress over what her brother had done. Suddenly, someone knocked on her room door, making Emma very tense. The knights entered her room, led by her older brother. She asked the young man why he needed guards, but he only smiled sarcastically in response. He asked when his sister dressed like this, and probably thought she could seduce the old Count. The young man also said that Della should go with him. The girl, with complete confidence in her voice, said it seemed like he was trying to blame someone else. The young man said that this was related to accusations about the sale of family land to the Lucially family. And he asked if the young man had any evidence that she had done anything similar. He, furious, replied that he had intercepted the letter she was trying to send through the maid. But the girl stated that she had no idea what kind of letter he was talking about, and that the letter she was sending had already reached its owner. Therefore, her brother does not need to worry at all, and the letter is sound and safe. The brother was surprised what real letter she was talking about, and showed her a letter that he supposedly intercepted from the maid, where the girl confessed to Count Yasha that she had sold the land. Della confidently stated that she did not write this letter, and moreover her brother probably sold the land. Not her. Lady Lucially told her about 3 key points in the future. Firstly, not to trust Count Yasha. Secondly, about letter interception. And finally, about Erdel's actions. After Count Yasha visited a gambling house where small sums of money were kept. Turning around, the stakes increased, and from then on, people, blinded by the prospect of getting rich quickly, began to play dice. In the end, many lost fortunes, and Della asked if her brother was trying to pay off his gambling losses with forged documents. The problem was that the brother owed a sum of money to the younger brother of Duke Lucially. And Della was the first to notice that he had paid with forged property documents. For this reason, he decided to devalue her position and falsely accuse her of something she did not do. His sister said that she learned about his betrayal through Lady Lucially and did not think that this tea party could help her so much. Because in other words, her brother's insidious plan had just been exposed. And next to Adela was the boy she asked to answer her question. The boy said that, in truth, the young master gave him a task and was hired by the Rimmer family. And it turned out that this boy knew how to forge his handwriting and that of his parents. And for his brother, this was not a surprise. At that moment, the Duke and his wife entered the office and asked if the young man really had nothing better to do than commit dirty deeds. The boy feared that his parents had heard everything he had just said, and his father immediately stated that the young man should reflect on his actions and repent for what he had done. Della said she would turn a blind eye to this, despite the fact that her brother tried to set a trap for her in front of the whole family and dishonor her honor. Della reported her request. She said she wanted the issue of her wedding not to be raised until she herself wanted to marry. And she reported it. Katzerank is a grand ball celebrated by the imperial family every 5 years. It is famous for its splendor and inaccessibility, which is why all secular nobility is so eager to attend it. However, unlike other aristocrats, representatives of the 3 great ducal families were regular guests. Richa told the girl that there are about 10 days left, and according to the original story, Della will become the villain. And Richa will be the main heroine. Discussions about the wedding with the emperor will take place twice. And initially Della will consent to be engaged to the emperor. However, he is already in love with Risha, so the marriage will be constantly postponed. And since the imperial family really needs the support of the Rimmer family, the emperor will propose marriage to Della. Della was destined to be the empress and would eventually decide to get rid of Rishi. Initially, the Rimmer family was the closest to the emperor, but after the emperor fell in love with a representative of the Lucially family, something happened to the Rimmer family. Apparently, Della realized that simply giving up her intentions was not enough. And she asked what the girl wanted to do. Risha confidently replied that surviving in an unknown world is all she needs now. If Lady Lucially is the main character, then the main character is His Majesty the Emperor. He must fall in love with the lady as soon as he sees her. However, in her opinion, it is Della who is the variable that can change the ending of this novel. Della said she would do it differently, and that there is a way to avoid marriage with the emperor. And Richa knows this very well. The lady laughed cheerfully and asked if the girl had already guessed everything. Della replied that she had 2 options, to run away or to prefer another man, and that she had a condition for Risha that the future fiancé's family had no flaws. As the opportunity arose, Della decided to ask why Risha decided to help her. She was very worried about the main character because she is her favorite character. And that is the reason, but Della understood that no one would help anyone just like that. And that's why she wasn't surprised by Risha's words, that she didn't want to help the girl just like that. She asked in return for her to tell her what she didn't know for sure, and Della had to accept her terms. The grand day of the gala ball had arrived, and the guests expected to see representatives of the 3 ducal families at the event. The ceremonial arrival of Lady Rishi Lucially of the Lucially clan was announced to the guests, who arrived with her parents. The venerable young duke and Lady Della Rimmer of the Rimmer family were also present at the event. A maid immediately approached Della and told her that she was here on behalf of a person of noble status, and asked her to convey a message. The maid conveyed the words, and Lady Rimmer immediately realized that she was talking about Richa. As expected, the girl was waiting for her in the rear balcony courtyard. And Della found her easily. The girl pointed out that this is a great place to talk because almost no one comes here. And they can talk in a relaxed atmosphere. Richa asked if Dela would like a glass of wine, and the girl agreed. The lady did not want to prolong the interesting conversation, so she immediately asked who he was. Della remembered that Richa promised to talk about a candidate who had nothing to do with the original story, about whom she was going to report today. She opened the door and pointed to one of the young men among the crowd and said that he was Archduke Sigbert Ise. This young man provoked strange feelings in the lady, and these emotions were more repulsive than friendly. Richa said that although this young man is the emperor's cousin, he is more like a clown with a title. And Dela has nothing to worry about. She looked at the young man for a while and was surprised that such a man inherited the title of Archduke. He had nothing to do with politics, but he was very popular just because he loved having fun with strange ladies. Richa stated that the girl does not have to believe everything he says, because he was much worse in the original story. And she said that she really hoped that Della would make a wise decision, following the call of her heart. She was still looking at the young man, who at that very moment was seducing one of the stupid young beauties. Della stared at this couple, and the idea of approaching them came to her head. She understood that she had nothing to talk about with him, let alone how to talk about marriage. Therefore, she decided to try to take the first step first and simply approached to greet the young man. She smiled sincerely and said it was an honor for her to meet His Highness the Archduke. The young man replied that in that case, it would be an honor for both of them to meet and get to know each other better. The young man asked if it was the first time the girl attended the ball, and Dela replied that 5 years ago she had already participated in it, and that she then had to leave the evening early due to some circumstances. It turns out that 5 years ago, he was not yet an adult man. He asked if the lady probably planned to stay longer at today's ball, since this was her first formal event. The girl really did not intend to leave the ball early and wanted to communicate with many of the guests present here. Della could not talk to him for long and said that she was forced to leave. And the first thing she did was take a glass of wine to relieve the excitement that enveloped her. Della never thought she would find herself in a situation where she would have to drink alcohol to calm down after meeting a young man. And if this continues, she will waste all her energy before meeting the Archduke again. Della decided that she needed to take a break in a deserted place and went out onto the terrace, which was probably not visited often. But she was deeply mistaken, because as soon as she stepped out onto the balcony, she immediately saw a fight between men, where one was attacking the second with a huge dagger. And the strangest thing was that the second opponent was the same Archduke Isai, whom she had just seen at the ball. Delassie was hesitant and did not know what to do, whether to scream or leave. Only 5 steps separated her from the company of young fighters, and the moment she wanted to flee, both young men directed their attention towards her. And now she perfectly understood that if she ran away now, she would become the next target. One of the young men threw a sword at the other in the hope of crippling him. And yet, the winner was the Duke, who strangled his opponent with his own hands, who was distracted for only a moment. After everything ended, the young man asked if it was the first time the girl saw a person die. The young man stated that this was an assassin, and given his skill, he must be a man from the Assassin's Guild who had been assigned a task. But it turned out to be more complicated than he thought, and the young man did not expect that today his hands would be stained with blood. Dela said that His Majesty managed to survive only thanks to her, but the young man thought the opposite. He said that during the festive ball everyone is punished for their sins, regardless of their position, and that it would be better to get rid of the witnesses and act as if nothing had happened. And if this girl had not been the daughter of Duke Rimir, he would not have worried so much. The girl did not believe his words and asked him to prove the authenticity of his speeches about her. She was sure that, whether intimidation or exploitation, there were always better options than murder. Dela said that even though the young man is a member of the imperial family, he cannot solve everything. The young man said that, when you are a member of the imperial family, sometimes it is not so easy to receive forgiveness. And the girl understood that now she needed to calm down, and this was her last chance. Della declared that she was inviting the young man to get engaged to her because she wants to become part of the imperial family. And he needs to hide the murder he just committed, and now he probably only has one way out. Her sin could now become her sin, and the young man asked if the girl was willing to tarnish her honor for all this. The lady confidently stated that if she regretted her choice, she would not have offered him such a thing. The young man held out his hand and asked if she was willing to give him hers. He asked her again if she was really willing to confirm her innocence in exchange for marrying him. He proposed a new version that an assassin attacked him and wounded him in the stomach with a sword. And the girl, becoming a witness, ran away in a good lie. There is always a grain of truth. And the closer to the truth, the more perfect the deception. The young man asked her to say that the assassin, noticing her, committed suicide and provided her with all the details so that she could give this testimony. And before it was too late, he asked to call a doctor because his wound was quite serious. She asked the young man to promise her that he would explain the whole situation as soon as he regained consciousness. Della went to find a doctor and quickly ran to the emperor's mansion to ask for help. She ran right in the middle of the ball and shouted loudly for someone to call a doctor, because His Highness, the Archduke, had just been attacked and wounded. Fortunately, the knights called a doctor from the imperial palace, but despite the chaos, the Archduke received medical assistance immediately. Thus ended the second Katzerong. However, the lady still had a series of interrogations ahead of her after everything that happened. She said that the assassin committed suicide after noticing her, but the thing didn't end there. The worst thing is that rumors spread, and one of the men who was present at the ball hurried to tell his friend about the interesting incident that happened there. He said that an unusual incident had occurred, and his interlocutor was very interested. The man said that the daughters of the three great duchies were in trouble and very disgraced and, according to his daughter, everyone is now talking about Lady Ramir. The man yawned and said it was in vain that his friend refused the invitation this time, and that such a performance cannot be seen every day. This morning, Della decided that she needed to go talk to her father about something. The man said that Duke Lucially was delighted, and that thanks to his family, his life was not boring. After all, their two families became a source of gossip, and all people did was discuss the incident at the ball. Della told her father that rumors are just rumors and are never true. The man was sure that, while gossip would circulate in Soviet circles, each of her actions would be evaluated, and an incredible step could become a shame for her entire family. So, as she wished, the man made her a marriage proposal, but now he doesn't know how to look at the people with whom this topic was previously discussed. The man said that his candidacy was not suitable, and there were incredible rumors about this young man. And noble blood says nothing about the nobility of its bearer. Della asked her father to refrain from such speeches, and he said he hoped the lady understood that such people should be avoided. The Duke said that the situation is different now. Then there were no rumors, but now everyone is starting to wonder what the girl was doing with the Archduke that night. Della thought she was tired of so much talk, but whatever happened, she was going to defend her honor. Her father scolded her so that this would not happen in the future, for her brother was also involved in a scandal with the Count's daughter. 3 years have passed since then, and there is not a single aristocrat in the empire who does not know about that scandal. The brother was then convicted of indecent acts towards the Count's daughter on the terrace during a ball evening. Although it was a private matter for those two, the brother excused himself because she had already reached adulthood. But the young countess was forbidden to appear in social circles as an unmarried girl. And it was as if she was the only one in this family who was mocked. Della said she did not appear in public for 10 days so as not to get entangled further, and since then she has not left the house. However, her father continued to scold her for her past actions, and the current situation could not help but push her to certain thoughts. She stated that the reason her father is so strict with her is only because she is a girl, and he is worried that her flaws might cause her value to decrease. The men were discussing the ball incident among themselves. One of them did not understand how high a place these families should occupy if they continued to do as they pleased. One of the men commented that the other even found it hard to believe. But in any case, it was an interesting incident. The man asked him to tell him more about the rumors circulating now. This man was Count Yasha, and he was very interested in the incident. He said that, they say, young Duchess Rimir and the Duke spent time on a deserted terrace during the ball. Of course, the case of the Lushly family was hard to ignore, but that of the Rimir family was much more difficult. But what surprised the man most was that Count Yashi showed so much curiosity about it. The man said that they should probably end today's conversation and meet next week at another time. His acquaintance left the office, and the man breathed a sigh of relief because he finally didn't have to listen to his empty talk. The young man sitting in his office asked him if he really had the same opinion. The man said that they belonged to the same old people and called the young man his master. He asked what Count Yasha thought about this, and the young man replied that he was Count Yasha. He said that he simply borrowed his name and that, in fact, Count Yasha belongs to the young man. The young man said that, in any case, wealth and honor are inherent to people, and they are of no use to him. And anyway, he found out the news thanks to his friend, and it turns out that Dela is in trouble. The man said that yesterday he forgot to give a letter to the young man and took a white envelope with a beard seal from his pocket. He stated that when the young man, being far from the rest of the world, is cheered up by a letter from Lady Rimir. He feels confused. Shortly before this, the young man had asked this gentleman to become Count Yasha so that he could be the patron of a young lady. He said that when he saw this girl, he introduced himself to her as Count Yasha. After meeting this unusual girl, the young man immediately told Louis that this lady would become unusual when she grew up. And now 13 years have passed, and the young man has kept in touch with her through correspondence. A whole week has passed since that incident at the ball, and Dela has remained in the shadows of society all this time. However, the girl was very worried about the case and could not understand who and why he sent the assassin to the Duke. And didn't Richa say that in the original story, she was a supporting character that no one cared about? The lady clearly felt that something was wrong here, but she had no way to find an answer to this question. Moreover, since then the house has become noisy. At that moment, the maid entered her room and said it was time for lunch. She asked the maid if anything unusual had happened recently, but the girl replied that there was nothing unusual. Dela asked what was happening with the rumors that had spread about her. But the maid said she heard absolutely nothing. Dela noticed that this new maid, compared to that girl, was quite smart. And she did not give in to emotions, caring only about her own interests. It turned out that the maid knew how to read a little, which meant she came from a noble family. A week has already passed since she started working here, and Dela could already ask her for a favor. But the maid said that the Duke ordered her not to send or convey anything. Dela did not speak to her again and deliberately dropped the fork on the floor so that the maid would leave and bring a new one. 2 more girls were near the door. Dela asked them to come in and told them that sitting in the rooms was very boring. She asked the maids not to be shy and said that she would love to hear about their family and of the rumors circulating about her. But the maids declared with certainty that the lady had nothing to worry about. One of the maids accidentally mentioned Lady Lushly's name, and Dela began to suspect what was happening. The maid said that His Majesty the Emperor, who was not present during the ball, was actually with the Duchess at that time. The maids confirmed that the young Duchess was indeed with the Emperor during Kachiranch. Dela thought meeting a girl whose family was against imperial power was very unexpected. And if she hadn't known that Lady Lushly was the protagonist, it would have been hard to believe. The girls also said there were rumors that people from the imperial palace regularly came to the estate. And the Archduke once arrived, but the Duke would not let him in. If the Emperor marries a girl whose family opposed imperial power, the ruling family's position will worsen. So the best way out of this scandal is to marry a member of the Rimir family. If this happens, then everything will end as Lady Lushly said, before the story reverts to the original. Dela asked the maid to tell her father that she would like to learn tea preparation while in captivity. The next day, a young man arrived for the girl, who was a true connoisseur of different types of tea. And he could tell her anything about each of them. This man was from a small shop, whose name no one really knows, and Dela doubted he would live happily ever after. But judging by the fact that he was dressed like that, it gave the impression that he was a very greedy person. The girl said she was sad at the thought of enjoying that tea alone, so she would like to write a recommendation and ask the young man if he had heard of Count Yasha. The young man said they knew him, but the lady said he must act in secret. The girl said that, unlike her, her father did not like this kind of business. So it would be better if the letter reached the recipient as soon as possible. She placed the envelope in his hands and asked him to say that Dela Rimir had sent it. The girl swore to the Rimir family that Count Yashu would definitely support the young man. So far the young man keeps his word and does everything she asks. That day, Louis sat in his office and listened to the silence, as he hadn't been able to relax for a long time. A young man also sat with him and thought he was very annoyed by the sounds filling this room. Louis understood that the reason for the young man's anger was quite obvious, and he probably hadn't received an answer yet. Because usually at that age correspondence with clients starts to become irritating. The man was worried. The young man had probably already heard rumors that the imperial entourage was visiting the Rimir mansion. He asked Mr. Jacob to maintain his position and promised that he himself would follow the events. At that moment, their conversation was interrupted by a young man who introduced himself by the name of Lion and said he had brought a letter of recommendation from a noble person. He said he brought a letter from Lady Rimir, and Louis, without hesitation, let him in. The man affirmed that he had read the recommendation and definitely promised to send someone to Lion later. Louis stayed with the gentleman, who was also interested in the letter they had received. The young man looked at the content and said that most likely this letter was not intended for them. He said he could not interfere with the correspondence, so he asked to simply deliver the letter to the recipient. And he himself ordered someone to be called immediately. At that moment, Risha also received a letter requesting that the ladies organize a tea party to which the Rimir clan would be invited. The Archduke was in his study that afternoon, deep in thought. He knew there were rumors that negotiations were taking place between the imperial family and the Rimir family about a wedding. These rumors have been relevant for 3 days, and the subject apologized for providing information late. The Archduke thought it seemed true, yet the actions were more like a warning of war. And using Lady Rimir's name, the Emperor is clearly trying to destroy the young man. If the girl sides with the Emperor, he will immediately get rid of him, punishing him for what happened at the ball. But there was also a variable here. She is not the type of person one can reason with so easily, considering the last time a sharp sword was presented to her throat. But the girl still insisted on her own way. The young man had just pulled out a letter and read an invitation to a concert to be held at the imperial palace in it. The next day, Dela, along with her father and brother, attended a very honorable meeting. The father asked the girl to be modest, and they were probably invited in connection with the discussion about the marriage between Dela and His Excellency, the Emperor. Although Dela had sent a letter to Lady Lucially through Count Yasha, she still didn't believe she could sit in the imperial palace. As Dela looked around, in the distance she saw a girl who looked very much like the one who fought with her husband after the tea party. It was strange that the daughter of a not very rich marquis was invited to such an event. Dela greeted Lady Lexicile, and the girl immediately recognized her interlocutor. She said she came alone because she was the only one in her family who had received an invitation. She approached Lady Rimir and whispered that she wanted to tell her something. The girl said that Lady Lucially asked for a note, and it seemed very important to her. Dela thanked the girl for fulfilling the request and asked how things were going with her husband. The girl smiled and replied that everything was fine for them, and then they started cursing much less. A tall young man approached Lady Rimir and told her she looked incredible today. It was Archduke Isai whom she had met before. The young man smiled and said this was their first meeting after that ball, and that the girl could spare him a minute. He said he would like to discuss one of their general agreements with Lady Rimir. The girl agreed and said that in that case, they would probably have to go to a more secluded place to talk. They sat on the sofa in the hall, and the young man asked her if she really wanted to know why the assassin attacked him during a Christmas celebration. He said that because the investigation did not progress, today he intends to make an official statement and close this matter. The girl asked, "It turns out the Archduke still knows who sent the assassin." The young man replied that it was definitely someone's fiancé, or it could also be the one who made him lose a fortune at the gaming table. Dea asked the young man not to ruin her reputation further with such entertainment, because his actions would also affect her. The young man said he had agreed and offered to seal their agreement, and then skillfully hugged the girl and kissed her on the lips in front of all secular society. And everyone understood that there was no turning back, and that it didn't matter at all if Dela was doing the right thing, and if she would regret her choice in the future. There was definitely no turning back, as the eyes of all the guests turned towards the young couple, passionately hugging on the sofa in front of everyone. At that moment, her brother approached the girl, and Dela understood that there would be an important conversation. He put his hand on her shoulder, asked her to stop, and asked if she was even thinking about what she was doing. Because if her father found out, he would be angry. Dela said it would be better for her brother to be happy, and that he would soon understand everything perfectly himself. Richa found out what happened on that floor, but didn't even suspect that Della would be involved in this. The original also mentions an ambush set by a hired assassin. This incident was considered trivial and was called an assassination attempt motivated by passion. But the girl didn't think this matter would affect the Archduke. But at least she was incredibly happy that she and this young man were now on the same page. It turns out the incident went far beyond the scope of the original story. And now, a young man stood in front of her with a bouquet of red roses. On this special day, the Archduke visited the Rimir family, who thanked him profusely for honoring them with his visit. The young man apologized because he had received the Duke's invitation a long time ago. But he didn't have enough time to reach them. He was also very curious to know why the Duke decided to invite him to his house. The man said that, at the imperial ball 6 days ago, there was a scandal in which he and his daughter were seen. And his daughter, he decided it was just another dirty rumor, but now he sees that everything is actually a bit different. He heard that it is now fashionable for aristocrats to embellish the truth in every possible way. So he understands the basis for the distrust towards the girl's parents. However, he assured them that the rumors were true, just as he could not deny that the truth had already been distorted. Dela's father really wanted to know to what extent the truth was distorted, and what really happened there. The young man thought that the Duke probably understood perfectly that his daughter would under no circumstances choose someone like him as a partner. And he intends to find out the truth by any means, so the young man did not want to resort to such methods. But he had to add some emotion to this boring chat. He stated that, compared to Lady Della, as a partner, he loses on all fronts. Not to mention the fact that she saved his life, and he did his best to hide his feelings. All he had to do was look into her eyes, and all his pathetic attempts were in vain. That's why he proposed to her on the imperial ball day, and he accepted her invitation only because he wanted to hear her answer. The young man knelt on one knee and asked the girl if she could give him the answer right now. The Duke sincerely said he understood his feelings, but his daughter still had too many flaws to marry. But the Archduke said he was happy with everything, and that two imperfect people want to be together and become better people, helping each other in this desperate quest. Dela affirmed that everything she told her father before was completely true. The Duke said that once both sides had expressed their opinions, he would like to hear what the Duke himself thought about it. The father replied that he respects his daughter's choice, so Dela herself can speak for them. Dela took the young man's hands and told him she had agreed to become his wife. Then her brother stood up from his seat and asked what the gentleman meant. The young man asked if they seriously meant that all these rumors were true, and how they even decided to marry after only 2 fleeting encounters. The Archduke confidently reported that Lady Della was not only a beauty, but also his savior. And he was sure that 2 encounters would be enough for him to fall in love with her. Della's parents never answered, and the Archduke announced that he would no longer take up their time. The Duke asked him to stay, and suggested that he knew very well that active negotiations were taking place with the imperial palace regarding his marriage. The girl replied that she was aware and knew about these conversations. Her father wondered why she finally chose the Archduke, and if he really had untapped potential. Della replied that she had finally found someone who was ideal for the role of her partner. And besides, they got caught up in the latest scandalous news. And the man could not imagine that his daughter Della would one day completely ruin all his future plans. After talking with the family, the girl went to the Duke, and the lady reported that he, very unexpectedly, gave her a bouquet. The Archduke said he would like to make Adela a very interesting proposal. The young man suddenly asked if the girl would like to move to the Archduke's residence right now. The girl thought for a moment, but the young man said it was not difficult for him to repeat his question. Della replied that if they started living together before getting engaged, dirty rumors would inevitably spread, which she definitely did not want. Therefore, the girl said she would first try to convince her father on her own. And if there was no progress, then they could do what the young man suggested. The Archduke decided to ask her a question and wanted to know if the bouquet he was carrying did not please the young lady. And they would still conclude that they need to show themselves in public as a loving couple. The Archduke smiled and thanked the girl for paying attention to him and answering all his questions. That evening, the gentleman was upset because everyone said the marriage proposal came from the palace. And now they said that this girl was ready to get engaged to the Archduke. The man assured that if Lady Della agreed to the marriage, perhaps she had her own reasons. The young man said that the benefactor should behave as a mentor should, and not as this girl acts. He asked Louis when his public appearance was, and it turned out it was a very long time ago. The young man thought that if he suddenly resumed his social activities, the public would overnight lose interest in this poor girl. The man half agreed, so the young man was preparing to go out into the world, and promised to think about how he could join secular society. He handed Lady Della's letter back, and the young man began to unfold it with interest. Every time he started reading letters from this girl, he smiled sincerely and his eyes filled with incredible interest. The man asked what had happened between them, and it turned out that Lady Rimir wanted to meet Count Yashu. She also writes that she plans to move to the Archduke's house in the near future. And for some reason, after these words, the young man became noticeably sadder. He was sure that the probability of her recognizing him after all this time was insignificant. And in this case, he must prepare the best suit and carriage with the noblest horses that can only be found in the empire for Count Yashu. Once upon a time, her father asked Adela to remember one important thing for the rest of her life. When she grows up and new people appear in her life, the girl must pay special attention to their homes in their home. A person unconsciously leaves many small traces that say much more about him than about himself. And that is what her father always said. Della noted that the Archduke seemed like a rather extravagant person and ended up at his residence only to assess the situation before finally accepting the offer to move. The young man showed the girl his estate, which even had its own gardens, in which there were several covered terraces, so that at any time of the year it was possible to fully enjoy the beauty and grandeur of this place. The girl noticed that this garden was truly magnificent, and it was impossible to take her eyes off it. She also noticed that the Archduke's clothes and accessories were impeccable and wondered if, to be honest, they were too different. Della asked, apparently the young man was incredibly enjoying all the luxury surrounding him. One look was enough to understand how much effort and time was invested to create all this indescribable beauty. The young man indicated a chair where they could sit and talk more closely. It was expected that her father would not make concessions, but she would never have thought that he would delay the answer for a whole week. Della said she was not used to doing something to show off and suggested that the Archduke, in the interest of fairness, reserve the right to organize the wedding. The young man suggested ending the conversation here and said that the girl had not yet visited any room, which was a luxurious bedroom. The Archduke said that when they got married, this room could become their common bedroom, in which case he would be happy if this room also met the girl's preferences to some extent, and even if their marriage only has legal value. Everyone will do it, they have already become spouses. Bella warned that the young man wouldn't mind if she did a little magic inside. This room was less flashy than the others, but the lady would still like to change something in it. In fact, the young man thought that the girl would not want to share a bed with him, so he decided to clarify this point. He said there was one more place he still had to show, and it turned out to be a room at the end of the hallway on the second floor. Upon opening the door, the girl held her breath in surprise, because what she saw was simply incredible. It was a luxurious library with a huge variety of books and a cozy interior. Della noted that the library looks very cozy and is surprised by such diversity. The young man asked if the lady liked everything, and Della was simply delighted with what she saw. The Archduke smiled and said that he had finally managed to give her a gift that pleased her. That day, when they first spoke, Della said she really liked books, and that's why the young man brought her here. The girl really looked very happy, and it was truly admirable. A few hours later, Della's things had already arrived at the mansion, and surprisingly, there were very few boxes. And all because, thanks to the young man and his personal library, she could leave most of the books at home. Still, her plan worked. She and the Duke moved a week later and got officially married. All this time, the girl wondered if she had done the right thing and if she had made the right decision. She told the young man that she would like to invite another person to the wedding who had supported her for 13 years and had been a faithful companion throughout her life. Gradually, Della settled into the new house a few days later. The butler approached her and told her that the lady had guests. The girl thought about it. She invited only Count Yasha and suggested that he could come in company, but in the end, she herself had to receive more than one. And at such a surprise, the girl began to get very nervous, but she needed to prepare and greet the guests. For a moment, she closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she saw in front of her the same young man she had seen in her distant childhood. She looked with astonished eyes at the long-haired young man standing in front of her, and could not believe that he was actually the same Count Yashu. But a man approached the young man and told him that he was the real Count Louis Yashu. The man politely greeted Lady Della and said he was very happy to see her. Nen pointed to the young man and said, "This young man is his adopted son named Jacob, and, due to an illness, he has been talking about him since he was little." The girl did not understand what was happening and why the Count had adopted someone, because she knew nothing about this, but for some reason the adopted son was an exact copy of the person she saw in childhood. She said she was eternally grateful to the man for everything he had done for her, and that she probably should have invited him much sooner. At that moment, the Duke approached them and asked what Della was doing here. The young man forgot something, so he had to return. He was nearby and decided to check on his future wife. He threw a blanket over the girl and asked if she was probably cold and decided to take care of her. He shook hands with the man sitting at the table with Della, who also greeted the Archduke. The man also introduced a long-haired young man and said that this was his adopted son, Jacob. Sigart noted that this young man had a terrifying aura, and he had already heard about the Count's secret adopted son. But he was still very surprised. The Duke noticed that the young man was constantly smiling when looking at Della, but he calmed down thinking that, after all, he and Della were not a real couple. He got up from the table and apologized, saying they could continue communicating without him. The young man noticed that this young man was really interested in Della, and maybe they could become temporary allies. Della was truly very grateful to Count Yasha for everything he did for her, because this man had been her most faithful and reliable support for many years. Many people know what they want, and the girl's father gave her what she never dreamed of. But he did not give her what she really needed. Disregarding material values, there is a rare happiness that a person experiences when they finally get what they want. Della admitted that it was Count Yasha who blessed her with this strong feeling. After their meeting, Louis and the young man returned to their estate, and the young man, sitting in the carriage, stated that Louis did not surprise him at all. And all because the man, upon meeting, asked the lady to do him a favor and study with Jacob, because the man didn't care about his education, and he thought he could ask the girl about it. Louis noted that the lady even rejected the palace's proposal, choosing the Archduke and, to be honest, they don't suit each other at all. The Archduke has a high rank, but his behavior does not correspond to it at all. Louis turned to Jacob and asked if he was listening to him or if he wasn't bothered at all. The young man said there was nothing to worry about. The lady would be fine, and she had made the right decision. The Duke's nanny asked her to organize the wedding because she really wanted it to be special. The woman burst into tears when she heard about her upcoming wedding and said they couldn't even imagine how long she had been waiting for this happy moment. Della smiled and said she trusted the woman with all the preparation and was sure she would succeed. After a while, countless dresses were brought for the girl, and everything that could make her more charming that day was prepared. Lady Della stood in front of the mirror, lost in thought, and could not contain her admiration. Looking at her reflection, her wedding dress was a true work of art, the finest lace and soft silk merged into a perfect ensemble. And harmonious. The dress wrapped around her figure, emphasizing the grace of her waist, and flowing into a romantic skirt that gently touched the floor. And every step she took gave the dress a lightness and sophistication, as if it were made for dancing. The maid was amazed at how beautiful the girl looked, and she and the young master couldn't take their eyes off her. The dress really shone on Della, and the young master also seemed to like it. Once the dress fitting was over, Della informed the young man that she would like to go home for a while. He asked why she would like to go to her estate. Della said she had several things left that she would like to resolve there and put an end to. And the young man agreed without hesitation and wished the girl a good trip, asking her to promise not to take off her wedding ring during this time. A few days later, the girl arrived at her estate. Her parents received her. She immediately noticed that the atmosphere had completely changed and had become warmer and friendly. The father said he would leave in 2 days, but no matter how much the girl asked, he still wouldn't have told her the real reason for his departure. She realized that Erdal had started avoiding her, their relationship had become tense, and something must have happened while she was away. The girl asked her mother where her brother had gone, because she hadn't seen him that morning. The woman was surprised that the lady asked such a question, because before she wasn't interested in where her brother was. She said he had gone to train for the order and would be away for a whole month, and that he would also have to renounce his title to become a knight, which in itself is extremely difficult for a determined young man. The girl supposed that this tension between son and father arose from this, but she was sure that Erdal was just trying to find himself, and that mom was back in her repertoire. In fact, the mother was always afraid of her father and never acted against his will. She always wanted her daughter to be the smartest, but not a bully and a know-it-all. The lady said she was always very worried when she thought about her daughter's marriage. Men do not choose women superior to them, and marriage is a choice that requires long calculations and careful ones. She admitted that she was very worried that no one would choose her daughter, and the girl was very upset when she heard these words. Everyone has the right to choose, but it also happens that some are deprived of human rights. The woman said that the lady probably knows her rights, but does not think about those who do not have them, but rather wants to do the same freely. And the lady probably should show pity, but simply laughs at them. The lady said she did not want to read a moral lesson to her daughter, but asked her to remember that one's dreams and another's reality are incompatible. And if she is happy, the rest does not matter, because she always wanted this for her beloved daughter. She said it was time for her, and she really hoped that in the future they could also have a sincere conversation. The consequences of this conversation turned out to be more serious than they might seem at first glance. And Della realized how prejudiced she had been for many years towards her mother. And she could not admit how stupid she had been all this time. In this small town, there was an unusual grocery store that, although it didn't look special at all, kept many secrets, and the flow of people never dried up. Previously, this building was the home of a magician, so the remnants of magic are still kept within its walls. And although this was not the first time Della had encountered magic, she was still amazed by its power every time. She was at Rishi's estate, who learned of her engagement from a letter and hurried to congratulate her. The lady affirmed that her original plot would also cease to exist in a week when the wedding takes place. And she really hopes that Richa will also be there. Richa agreed and said that in return, she wanted Della to accompany her to an interesting place. She handed her a sheet of paper and asked if Della had seen such an invitation before. There was a strict hierarchy among noble ladies, which was based on the status of their husbands or parents, and only a small portion of noble ladies could join this society. These meetings were founded by Regan Kachulan, the imperial aunt and only crown princess. Richa asked how the lady would feel if she asked her to accompany her to this meeting. And she was sure that this could help her in the future. That's why she received this invitation, especially for her. The meeting would take place 3 weeks later in the same castle, where the crown princess resides. Della suddenly asked if the girl was sure that the great archduke was actually just an extra. And Richa replied that this character was mentioned very rarely in the novel. The girl asked. She had heard some rumors about Richa and His Majesty, so she was interested to know what happened to them. Richa said she saw him a couple of times after the Kajulan ball, but it seems the events deviated a bit from the original plot. And the emperor did not fall under her charm this time. Logically, the original plot changed due to Della's decisions. However, situations where she had nothing to do also changed. A few days later, Della returned to the castle and saw that everyone was busy preparing for the wedding. She and the Duke were able to meet only 2 days before the start of the ceremony. Della asked the young master when he arrived at the estate. He felt some tension between them and said that the girl seemed to want to tell him something. They sat on the sofa in the hall, and Della said she wanted to talk to him about enrolling in the academy. There were 3 famous academies in the empire. The Kachulan Academy was directly connected to the palace, and only children from the highest noble families could enter. The Middle Academy was open to various noble families of both sexes, and the 3rd Lower Academy was open to everyone. And only a few members of the nobility studied there. The girl said, to be honest, someone asked her to teach a child, and she would like to broaden her horizons to fulfill the request well. She read many books, but could not pass it all on knowledge, although she knew very well that women were not allowed to visit the Kachulu Academy. The young man said that studying at the academy involved some risks, and suggested that the girl look for a private tutor, or the best graduates among the 3 academies, and he really wanted to believe that this would be the best option for her. He also said that Della does not need to negotiate with him at all to make an important decision on her own. The lady was not used to her wishes being heard, because this had never happened in her family. What she really wanted and desired with all her soul always met with hostility. And she had to give in or beg. And so, when she was a child, all her wishes turned to dust, and now it is very difficult for her to believe that someone could actually care. The girl decided that she should not miss this opportunity, and asked to find the most famous teacher in the empire. At that moment, Della remembered that in a conversation with her mother, you had told her what a good person the Archduke was. Then the mother noted that the girl looked very calm when talking about her future husband. The woman suggested that the great Duke had probably deceived her, and that when they lived together, they inevitably begin to influence each other. Sharing your life with someone means walking towards an uncertain future, so sometimes you just have to accept changes in the plot. The mother asked her daughter if she was really happy with this young man, and that day the lady confidently replied that she now feels alive and truly happy more than ever. On this beautiful sunny morning, Della stood near the window, thinking that her wedding would finally take place tomorrow. The maid approached her and told her that a letter had arrived for the lady. This letter was addressed specifically to the lady, and the girl realized that this letter came from the palace. She decided to see what was written there, and the strangest thing was that she saw the name of His Majesty the Emperor. After the girl received the letter, the Emperor was immediately informed that Lady Della had received his message. Eugene Cajulan was a young, golden-haired emperor, and something hadn't occupied him as much for a long time as the situation that had recently occurred. And this was nothing more than a scandal between the great duke and the lady of the Rimir family. But there was something that neither the imperial family nor the Rimir family knew. This scandal was actually fabricated by the emperor himself. Both people involved thought they made their own decision, but they were very wrong. Because only the emperor knew the real truth. The emperor was full of insidious plans and wanted to finally look the archduke in the eyes thanks to this witch. This spring morning was the day of the wedding ceremony, and the guests were entertained by a girl playing a huge harp. A light breeze played with her long hair, giving her even more charm. She gently plucked the strings, and they responded with soft music, filling the air with melodies that seemed to tell stories of love, dreams, and freedom. Every note sounded with such grace and emotion that it could touch even the hardest heart. All the ladies of Soviet society whispered about the young archduke, who, as if it were yesterday, constantly walked in brothels and now, suddenly, was going to start a noble family life. Many knew that the young man had previously lived in gambling houses and did not think that Lady Rimir was different from other noble ladies. But suddenly, a long-haired young man appeared at the wedding, who definitely surprised everyone with his unexpected appearance. He looked around and said there was a lot of noise here. The young man asked those present where Lady Della was, but Louis was sure they could see her when the ceremony began. At that moment, the girl had just gotten her bridal hairstyle, which should have looked as expressive as the bride's dress. The Archduke's nanny was very happy to see the girl so happy, and Della was very grateful to the woman for her efforts. In truth, what impressed her most was Sayart's taste, who insisted on this particular dress. Suddenly, she heard a voice behind her softly saying that she looked beautiful today. The young man also looked charming in this dazzling white suit made of expensive silk. Richa was also one of the guests, and immediately went to Della to tell her that she was not sure if she could stay for the whole ceremony. The lady was worried that something had happened to Rishi and asked if everything was all right with the girl. Richa was very happy that the lady was worried about her, and this is what distinguished her from Della, whom she had read about in the original. The lady said she was actually going to see the emperor, and congratulated the young bride again on her upcoming wedding. She said she really hoped the ceremony would go well, and asked Della not to worry about her. The solemn time for the priest's official speech arrived, who asked if the young people swear to love each other and respect each other until death. Della replied without hesitation that she swears fidelity to her husband until the last minutes of her happy life. The young man also replied that he agreed and promised to love and respect the beautiful Della Rimir. They sealed the vow with a kiss, and the guests present applauded loudly at this exciting moment. The guests noted that these young people looked like a worthy couple, and the Archduke even looked at this beautiful lady with loving eyes. And who knows, maybe they will suit each other well, and the ridiculous rumors are complete lies. In the warm candlelight flickering in the luxurious hall, the Archduke and Lady Della stood in the center of the hall. Their gazes met, filled with tenderness and anticipation. The music filling the space ignited a lively spark in their hearts. And both felt that the world around them was disappearing, leaving only the two of them. Lady Della was dressed in a magnificent wedding dress, from which lace flowed. And satin, and her hair, styled in an exquisite hairstyle, was decorated with delicate flowers. The Archduke, in his elegant tuxedo, looked like the personification of nobility and confidence. They began to dance, and every step, every turn was perfect, as if their hearts beat in unison. And serious gazes and soft smiles spoke of deep understanding and mutual love. Louis and the young man sat at the side table, and the man noted that Lady Della really looked happy. The young man watched this performance and declared that it was time for them to leave, abruptly standing up and heading towards the exit. But suddenly, he felt a very strong sensation and realized that it was an incredibly strong thirst for blood. He stopped for a moment, and it seemed that bestial rage, which he had been trying to extinguish all this time, flashed in his eyes. At that moment in the palace, the emperor was sitting at the table and ordering papers when he was informed about the arrival of Lady Rishi. Eugene Cajulan was the main male character of this novel, and that day Richa was invited to meet him. But to her surprise, the girl felt very lost and annoyed. She realized that the emperor didn't even look at her, and everything was different from what she expected. But still, she tried with all her might, even though she felt incredibly broken. Risha understood that she still couldn't replace this girl, de la Rimir, for him. And now the emperor was no longer completely interested in her, and while she was trying to deceive de la and take her place, everything was useless. However, it was a meeting of two characters, and the girl was hoping that something would change afterward. And she probably wanted to be optimistic all this time, not seeing all the cruel reality happening before her eyes. And the fate she wanted to avoid was Rishi's tragic death after 7 years. All members of the Lucius family were accused of insulting Empress de la and executed in front of everyone. And only Risha knew that the emperor was behind the attack on the great duke at the Cachulan ball. The only time the emperor paid proper attention to the girl was when she pronounced the archduke's name out loud. And she wanted to become that special card that he could never exchange for anyone else. She didn't care at all if he saw her as a crazy woman talking about some kind of adventure. The wedding banquet continued, and she gradually began to feel tired. The young man said that it wouldn't hurt them to rest a little together upstairs. Following his words, the girl went up the old stairs to the second floor to finally be completely alone. When she entered the room where no one was, she realized that the wedding had finally ended. All this time she had been very tense, and now she just wanted to lie down quickly in a warm bed and cozy. Suddenly, the girl heard footsteps and immediately decided that she urgently needed to escape from that place. The lady hid behind the door and covered her mouth with her hand so that the slightest sound would not escape her. De la trembled with fear and did not understand why this was happening to her on her wedding day. In the darkness, she saw a man who was probably an assassin because he had a black mask on his head and a sharp sword in his hands. The assassin opened the door with all his might and struck the lady hiding behind it. The last thing she saw in front of her were the ruthless eyes of the assassin who brought the deadly weapon from behind. The emperor informed Richa that killing a bride on her wedding day was very bold and cruel. Richa asked the emperor why he himself wanted her to be the first to provide him with proof. The young woman was indignant because they had no other choice, and in the end everyone put themselves first. But the only thing she is sure of is that the emperor must trust her. After all, she is the only one who can tell him that Sayart is the real villain of this novel. When Lady Della finally opened her eyes, she saw the corpse of an assassin in front of you. And incredibly, someone had defeated him. And in front of her stood the same young man who came with Louis. But the most terrifying thing was that instead of his human hand, there was the hand of a monster with huge and long claws, all covered in blood. De la did not understand what was happening, and with eyes full of tears, she looked at the young man, who turned out to be a real monster. He offered his hand to the girl, and de la remembered how Richa had warned her not to believe everything she saw about Count Yasha. And the words that the lady herself would understand everything proved useful now, because at that moment a completely different Count Yasha appeared before her. Richa informed the emperor that she had sent a first-class assassin and was sure that Lady Della should be dealt with. In the end, it turned out that the emperor also met the assassin and asked him not to harm the girl so that she would not die under any circumstances. Richa turned out to be a villain. She always hated the main character, but she couldn't imagine that she wouldn't die so easily. But even if she dies, Richa will not be able to do anything at all, because Eugene was already doing a good job. The girl was sure that everything was going according to her plan, and she could turn the original plot around and save the Duke from imminent death, because she is the main villain of this novel. After everything that happened, the Duke was informed that his wedding had been visited by an assassin who had failed to kill his fiancée. He assumed it could be Eugene, because they desperately wanted to kill each other. And mercenaries were sent countless times, but this time it was completely different. Eugene would not do anything that could harm the Rimmer family, and this was the most compelling evidence. But whatever it was, the technique used here was quite terrifying, and this enemy must have been very cruel. The young man was informed that he had received a letter from the crown princess, and suggested that Rishi's meeting with the emperor might have something to do with the ambush in which they had trapped Dala, and there were too many strange things in this story. That night the young man was next to his young wife, who had lived through a lot that night. He asked if everything was all right with the girl, who had been very quiet the whole time. She asked him if he remembered the assassin who came for him at the Cachulumble. The young man replied that he definitely could not forget this incident, and that the moments of this ball would remain forever in his memory. The girl said that she definitely needed to find out the truth, and asked the young man to promise her that he would never lie to her. She asked him to only tell the truth from now on, and even if there is no love in this marriage, they still need trust. Therefore, she was very interested to know who came for him that night at the ball. The young man, in turn, also wanted to know who took care of the assassin who came for the girl, and stated that he definitely woke up when the assassin had already appeared. Throughout this time, they encountered two assassins. The first came for the Archduke at the Cachulun ball, and the second arrived today for Dala. Unexpectedly, the young man said that he seemed to know who hired the Cachulumbal assassin. However, it is all the law with the enemy, and he can safely say that someone else is behind the recent incident. Moreover, at the ball, he had to face the threat alone, and then the young man promised that he would never drag the girl into this. Therefore, whether it is a search for the truth or punishment, he will definitely do what she wants. And in the end, it is his responsibility. People forget their vows when they find themselves on the brink of life or death. But Della really wanted to believe that this vow was the truth. That afternoon, Louis was in the hall when he noticed that there was a letter on the table. Sir Jacob should have returned by now, and he was sure that he would be here by then. Suddenly, a small, long-haired boy, dressed like a young master, appeared in front of him, and his hands were covered in blood. He laid the young man on the bed, and noticed that the young man was using all his strength. This young man was actually a dragon, and was considered a divine being. Due to their origins, dragons have powers related to time. These powers can be divided into 3 types: past, present, and future. And Jacob was part of a tribe that dealt with those in the past. He has had the ability to erase human memories. However, if he uses his power when his astral body is weak, he pays a very high price for his actions. Something definitely happened to Dela's memories, and she was sure that someone had helped her. But she didn't remember anything at all. She assumed that everything Sigurd said was true, but it is not explicitly mentioned in the original. But she clearly felt that someone else was with her that night, who took care of the assassin. All this time, someone helped her and remained as a faithful companion behind her. A maid entered the lady's room and said that the owner was already waiting for her. The lady thought about it. Madame Richa ordered her to come and supposedly help the girl choose a dress. But Della was sure that they were just trying to keep an eye on her. She realized that this maid was an intelligent girl, and that keeping her close would always be useful. And when she was on her side. The name of this maid was Belle, and she said that they would see each other very often now. The lady left with the maid, and respectfully greeted the young Archduke, who was waiting for her in the hall. The girl said that her father sent the maid from the family estate, and that it was very kind of him. The young man asked her if Dela wanted him to spend some time with her during the week, so she could feel better about everything that had happened. But the girl did not want to bother the young man with unnecessary worries, and taking a black envelope from her pocket. She said that, in fact, she would have to go somewhere. She placed a black envelope with a gold seal in front of the Archduke, and it only meant one thing. Inside was the long-awaited invitation to the palace, and no one could have expected what this meeting might bring them.